We have some good results for AP as well. Gains in AP Calculus of about 0.2 in terms of whether you took the exam, and then some score gains. That's the origin of our title. I don't know if you ever saw or heard of the movie Stand and Deliver. Stand and Deliver was the story of a high school teacher, Jaime Escalante, in Los Angeles. And the arc of the movie is that Jaime Escalante teaches in this ghetto school in Los Angeles with mostly Hispanic kids. And he gets his class to pass the AP Calculus test. And it's so unusual that the College Board disqualifies the scores and accuses him of cheating. And everybody has to be tested again, and again they pass. And so that's the triumph of Jaime Escalante, who was kind of an early no excuses teacher. The part of the story that's not told in the movie is that Jaime Escalante, who was originally Bolivian, he was a Bolivian immigrant, he was despised by his colleagues in the Los Angeles Teachers Union. They eventually drove him out of the school system and he moved back to Bolivia. Let me now show you the college results. These are very interesting and very important. This is important also in view of the quotes. These are lottery-based estimates of the effect of whether a child enrolls in a post-secondary institution. About half of the sample enrolls immediately. About 60% enrolls within a year of graduating high school. There is no significant gain in enrollment. It's positive, but it's not significant. The number underneath in parentheses is a measure of precision. The estimate has to be twice as large as the standard error to be significant. So those claims about enrollment were indeed misleading. These charters don't boost enrollment by enough for a statistically significant finding. So that's an important caution. That said, it's not true that they do nothing. What they are doing is they are shifting kids from two-year programs, what we call community college, into four-year programs. So they reduce enrollment in two-year programs, and they have a huge effect on four-year enrollment. And we think that that's probably a good thing, that the economic value of a bachelor's degree, a four-year degree, is probably much larger, maybe even twice as large as the economic value of a two-year degree, an associate's degree. So the charters are clearly improving post-secondary outcomes, but not necessarily in the way that they claim. Mostly what they're doing is they're sending kids who would have otherwise gone to community college for a two-year program to four-year programs at public universities like the University of Massachusetts. So that's a pleasing result, but it also suggests that we should pay close attention to the numbers that are going to come later before we decide whether that's a huge gain or not. Okay, well, there's some other things in the paper that go into some detail about mechanisms, why it is that charters do well, the role of peer effects, and also an investigation of claims about switching. Part of the debate about charter schools in the U.S. revolves around the claim that the charters send the troublemakers away, and that's why the other kids do well. We investigate all those things, and we don't find that they play a substantial role. We don't find much of a role for peer effects. My view is that the charters do well because the overall approach, the no excuses approach, for this high poverty population, it works quite well. That said, how well it works is an ongoing story. The last thing I want to show you, however, and I think this is particularly important in view of the debate about the role of test scores. So let me skip ahead to that. Are the test score effects worth anything? So we compute estimates at the school level. Not quite, this is risk sets, but you can think of these as schools. If I show you that a school boosts MCAS scores, which is the NCLB accountability measure, is that also a good school in terms of SAT? If I show you that a school boosts MCAS scores, is that also a good school in terms of four-year college enrollment? And the answer is yes. The test score effects are indeed predictive of longer-term impacts. So I think that's important because there's always a big debate about whether test scores are meaningful and whether it's appropriate to target test scores as an intermediate outcome. Of course, it's convenient to target test scores as an intermediate outcome, but we don't value test scores for their own sake. We value test scores because they tell us something about something good that we think is going to happen later. And here we have very clear evidence that schools that produce score gains in the short run also produce longer-term gains. That's a very important finding in my view. That's the most important finding to come out of this paper. Okay, well, why don't I stop there? I'm happy to discuss with you or take questions as you like.
So now, if anyone wants to pose a question to Professor Angrist, you have the choice, the opportunity to do it.
Can you tell us something about heterogeneity of effects by baseline achievement?
Yeah, that's an interesting. So I didn't want to take time on that, but I have a whole table here on that. We don't have to discuss every number here, but let me give you a bit of a flavor. One thing that we thought was very interesting is differences by sex, differences between boys and girls. Boys are generally doing badly and increasingly worse than girls. There's a big gender gap opening up in education in the United States. I think this is reflected in Western Europe as well. Today, most college students are female in the United States, and that gap already opens up in high school with girls doing better than boys. So we were interested in how charter effects vary by sex, and you can see actually that this intervention does as well for boys as for girls. You asked specifically about baseline scores. So here is baseline scores below median, above median. Below median, above median. And this is a very regular finding in our stuff. The worse you are going in, the more you stand to gain. Low baseline predicts big impact. Compare 4.23 to 3.6, compare 5.7 to 5. On SATs, compare 138 to 77. So I'm glad you asked that. That's an important difference. Same thing on special education. Charters do very well by their special education students. There's a big debate there. There are two questions that are raised. One, do charters admit enough special education students? As a rule, charters have fewer special education students than in the host district. That reflects application behavior, not selection, because the selection is by lottery. It is the case that special education students are less likely to apply for charter school than regular education students. On the other hand, the special education students who do go enjoy enormous gains. So you can see here, special ed, SAT gain of 166 versus regular ed, SAT gain of 92. So that's an important subgroup breakdown.